Willkommen, bienvenue, and welcome to Let's Learn the Electric Bass with Lyte. So, if you're here for an expert bass lesson from an expert bass player, you are in the wrong place. Head over to scottsbasslessons.com and learn from Scott Devine. He's really quite good, and his tutorials are fantastic. But, as with any expert teaching any super beginner, he will inadvertently make you feel terrible about your ability when playing this instrument. It's nearly inevitable, because anyone who is really good at something, they don't necessarily realize how difficult something is for an absolute beginner. And even if they do, they will still demonstrate it in a way that goes well beyond a beginner's capacity. And he's also aimed at not just beginners, so he's aiming at a fairly advanced crowd as well. So you can watch some of the things, and he'll just... and you're like, I am never going to be able to do that, Scott. I know myself. I will never do that. I guess I'm just putting this thing away. And that's terrible, because you could. It takes time, and you might not be able to devote enough time to the instrument to really get there. But if you want to get there, there's nothing stopping you, except you. And that's not a judgment on you. I've had this instrument since like 98 or 99. I still don't really know how to play it, because I didn't invest the time in it. So that's why we're doing this series, such that I actually invest the time in the instrument. So, if you're not here for an expert bass lesson from an expert bass player, why are you here? Well, that's because I have a significant amount of knowledge regarding music, musical instruments, and science. Should probably get used to where the camera is. 3 things: music, musical instruments, and science, which we'll use to explore the instrument, learn what it can do, and hopefully eventually become a decent bass player. I would love to be able to lay down walking bass lines that I can then solo over on the saxophone, which is my primary instrument at this point. Started on the clarinet, moved to saxophone, have learned the flute, the trumpet, the trombone, all sorts of things, but I never seriously got into the strings. I own this fretless bass. I own a couple of guitars. Granted, one of them is a video game controller. But I never really took the time. So that's what this series is going to be about. Applying not only acoustics, but also psychology to the process of learning the bass and what one can do with it. So once again, if you really want an expert lesson, Scott Devine is fantastic. If you want science, which, if you're subscribed to my channel to begin with, that's probably why you're here, then stick around, because there is plenty of science to be had with this instrument, how it works, and how you learn to play it. This first episode, we're going to cover a couple of my rules for learning an instrument, but we are not going to learn to play it today. Next time, we'll work on tone. Likely the time after that, we'll work on fretting, when you have no frets. I'm going to split up the episodes to try to keep them relatively short, because I don't want half-hour to an hour lessons when I'm not an expert, and I probably shouldn't be playing for more than 20 minutes. That's the first thing you need to know. Learning takes patience. And I know, when I was saying that, you just wanted me to finish it. But you need to be patient. When learning anything, whether it's the bass or Japanese or how to drive a car, it takes time. But thankfully for you, it doesn't take a whole lot of time all at once. You don't need to sit down and play for 4 hours a day when you first start. Actually, you really shouldn't play for 4 hours a day when you first start, because of reasons we'll cover in future videos. That is not the way to effectively learn for the long term. Yes, you will feel awesome during that time if your fingers aren't bleeding because of the type of instrument you're playing. But those 4-hour sessions will not be nearly as effective as, say, 12, 20-minute sessions. Because if you have that one day to practice 4 hours and then you don't practice for the rest of the week, that's super bad for you. You'll end up causing way more trouble than you'll cause learning. So, way better to do small practice sessions regularly than one huge one, and then I just don't have the time. Because you do. Just pick it up, play a few notes, put it back down. Even if you don't have 20 minutes, 15. If you don't have 15 minutes, 10. If you don't have 10, 5. If you don't have 5, 1. 1 minute of playing every day is still a minute of playing. Never beat yourself up for how little you practice if it's greater than 0. My next rule, I suppose that was rule number 1. Rule number 2, make as much as possible intentional. Whenever you're playing anything, make sure what you're doing with this hand, your posture, your breathing, yes, breathing, even on the bass, make it intentional as much as you can. I know you can't think about everything all at once, and I know that you're going to feel that all of this practice is to make it second nature, such that you don't have to think about it. But you still need to make the things intentional. You still want, every time you pluck, to be for a reason. Why are you alternating these 2 fingers? Why are you not using the 3rd or the 4th? Did you use the same fingering each time you tried to play something? Say you're doing this. Why alternate here? Why sometimes hammer on? Why not? Like, every single thing that you do should be intentional. Because if you just do it haphazardly, they'll all end up interfering with each other. And if you don't have one true, this is what I am doing, in mind, then when you try to do it again, it'll all fall apart. So it isn't necessarily as important to do it the right way, so much as the same way. Now, we will cover things later on why you will want to play it different ways. But every different way you play it should be intentional, and for either the purpose of learning, for the purpose of versatility, have a reason why you do it a certain way. And be consistent with you doing what you mean to do. And if you can't do it the way you mean, do it slower. And the 3rd rule, so that was rule 1, patience. Rule 2, make everything intentional. Rule 3 is always make music. Now, granted, you could have more rules for yourself. I always focus on precision and articulation and facility and all of those things, so I don't make rules about those. I make rules about things that I tend to forget. And I always forgot when I was learning. And so patience, I'm okay with patience. Always practice your patience. Being intentional, I always had a problem with because I would just fly through things and whatever came out, came out. And the 3rd thing, always make music, I was terrible with when I was originally learning, like the clarinet. Because I would be given exercises. And man, I would play the bejesus out of those exercises. Granted, not on this instrument, clarinet. But not a single time would I actually make the music. They would just be a bunch of notes flying on by. Even when you're just playing a note, make some music with it. Because there's so many things you can do with just one note. Now, I'm a terrible slap bass player. I don't really know how it works. But there are so many things you can do with dynamics, how loud and soft, articulation, and tone. Just with no fretting at all. It's just one note. And then once you start doing scales, you can push into it and pull back from it. You can keep the same tone or change the tone as you go. You can favor certain notes over others. There are tons of things that you can do to make every single thing that you play music. But why? Why, Lyte? Why would you make music out of stupid little exercises? Well, such that you don't have to worry about it when trying to make real music. If all of the things that you play are musical, then when you get to your tune, when you get to your gig, when you start playing in the garage with your friends, you don't have to worry about making music, because that's just what you do. Now, you should also come up with at least one rule of your own. Look into yourself. Think about what it is that you take for granted. Make up a rule, throw it down in the comments section. Because you might come up with a rule that someone else needs that they hadn't even thought of yet. Because my rules are great for me. They might not be enough for you. And for all I know, you always make music every time you touch anything. Or everything you do is super intentional. Like you're a former Marine sniper, and so everything you do is super intentional. Everything is exactly in its place. And you don't need that rule, but you might need something else about not being quite so rigid or tense or something. Everybody is different. Everybody is awesome. So make up your rule, leave it down in the comment section. Let me know how the camera is. Let me know how the sound is, because this is a new series, a new setup. Everything's a little bit weird. But next time we're going to focus on tone the time after. We will likely work on actually involving the fretting hand. And I know there wasn't a whole lot of science in this episode. Next episode will be chock full of acoustic science goodness. But I will see you in the next episode of Let's Learn the Electric Bass with Lyte.